All right. Hi, Sippy. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I greatly
That's all right.
appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. For those of you who do not know, this beautiful woman is an extraordinary bass producer. She has paved the way for so many women, including myself, to kind of break through the electronic dance music scene. She has releases on Deadbeats, Mock, Thrive Music, so much more. She finally came over to the States right before COVID hit. We'll talk all about that. But you have new music dropping on Friday, right?
Yes, I do.
Is it on? It's on
New
Denmark, right?
music.
It's for the remix
Yeah.
comp.
Yeah, so it's like it's part of the remix album, I guess, for the Bear Grillz album. So
Sweet.
I just did I've done a VIP of our track together with one of my mates, Dr. Werewolf. So that
Oh,
comes out on Friday.
that's awesome. I actually love Dr.
Yeah.
Werewolf too. I feel like
Do you know him?
yeah, I do actually know him. I played a few tracks of his live, so that's so funny. I would have never like guessed, but that's
Yeah,
awesome. I
it's
mean,
Yeah, it's really random because I feel like a lot of people, especially in America, might not know him. He's a Aussie-based producer and DJ, but he was pretty much my mentor from day one.
oh
So
wow.
he gave me my first club gig and my first residency, and then pretty much when I first started writing music, I had this like weekly thing where I went to his house every week just showing him what I'd done last week, and he kind of taught me so much at the start. So now, and he was actually the first person I ever put a track out with.
Oh,
And
that's
now,
crazy.
years on, we've done this together, which is like, I don't know, for me, it's really awesome to be able to do that with him. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was talking to I feel like it was like Pogman was on the other day with Chassis, and we were talking about
mm-hmm.
like how important it is to kind of have that like one mentor, whether it's you're taking lessons for them or they're like a close friend, because that's exactly how like I learned, where it was I was coming from a different genre of music, and then I just watched somebody produce all summer. And then it was like, okay, I kind
Mm-hmm.
of understand this. And then you start to like take the projects and get the notes and the criticism. But like learning with somebody consistently, I feel like is such a big deal for like consistent improvement instead of going to like 1,000 different producers, because there's so many ways to do things properly.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think it's important to like, I don't know, like I learn things and take things from like such different genres and such different people with such different approaches. But in saying that, like, I guess the thing, I've always had mentors from day one. And to be honest, Adam is my day one. Like, he was there from the absolute start when it came to like DJing, but then also producing and all that sort of stuff. And like, when it comes to that, like, the reason why having one person too is really great is because, like, one person that's kind of there through each stage at least, is it sort of, it keeps you accountable. Like, I think that's one of the most important things. For me, after I finished Icon, I pretty much said to him, like, I need to hand something in once a week. I need
Yeah.
someone to keep me accountable to that. And that's what he did, among a million of other things that he taught me. So yeah, having a mentor like that is really great. It helps a lot.
Absolutely. And oh my gosh, your journey has just been like long and awesome. And like I think of you in like this very like niche group of women who have like really like put the work in and like put their time in, and you just have such like a real actual like base of fans, not just like followers. And it's very
Mm.
exciting because I feel like when you, I mean, you can tell me like when you finally came to the States, was it so cool to meet so many people who had been listening to you for such a long time, and it's like your first time playing in front of them, your first time meeting them. It's such a different culture over here in the States versus Australia, I would imagine. I mean, are there any like noticeable differences?
Yeah, I mean, like, the American tour was like the most like amazing, bizarre, awesome, scary like
Yeah.
experience for me. I think, like, I was kind of, my goal when I first started producing, well, I mean, like, I always was into music, always wrote music as a kid, but not
Mhm.
electronic music or anything. And as I got into producing, like, my goal was to get over to the States from really early
Yeah.
on. And I've said this plenty of times, but like, I don't think a lot of Americans realize how hard it is for an artist to get over to the States in terms of visa and money and all sorts of things. The visa process is actually really tough to
I would
get
actually
into the
love to
States.
hear
So
about it if you don't mind sharing,
yeah,
because a
yeah, I
lot
can
of people
definitely.
don't understand.
Yeah, I'll definitely talk about it. I'll start with the tour and then tell you kind of the process a little bit. But
Perfect.
when it came to the tour, like on the one hand, I was so excited. It was something I was pushing for so long. I have an amazing team. I've got Harrison and Tony at 2+2 as my management, and then I have Jake, who's my agent at UTA. And you know, I was doing this tour with Zaya, with Lex, and it was just like show after show, and I literally got there and was like, this is the dream. But then before I left, like I had a moment where I was like, fuck, this is so scary, because I was like, I'd been to America before, but I was like, I've never moved out of home. I'm moving into my own apartment with no family, friends. Like I have really close family and friends here, and I was like, I have none of that. I've never set up an apartment before, let alone in another country, let alone while I'm touring 3 days a week, you know. And so there was that side of things. And then the other side of things that was so scary was like, I've set this goal for so long. And like, what if I fail? What if I get over there and no one shows up to any of the shows? And my big thing is, you know, I definitely think of like, how will I do if it all, you know, if everything doesn't pan out? What if no one shows up to shows and all this sort of stuff? And then as I got there, like I remember we would get to these towns and there would be just like so many people there. And I was like, what the fuck are all these people doing here? Like, especially for me, like in Australia, it's like you could play, you know, a big show in a big city, but it's still not that many people, because there's just purely not that many people in this country, you know, compared to America. So like, you know, we're playing on a Tuesday night in a city I've never heard of, and there are like hundreds of people. And I was like, oh, okay, they're just here because they're here. Like they party every Tuesday here.
Yeah.
And then I remember sending a message to Harrison being like, what are all these people? Oh no, I think I said it to Lex, and I was like, what are all these people doing here? I must have said it actually, no, I said it to the promoter, because I was like, oh, like, you know, like, and they were like, they're here to see you. And I was like, it was the most bizarre thing ever, because I was like, I've never been in person anywhere. And it was like amazing, but like, so I don't know, it was really hard, because I was like, I don't feel like I get to connect with people online. I try and connect, but I don't really resonate that well with social media in terms of like, I'm very much a big advocate for like living in the real world. So like when I see all that sort of stuff, I'm like, oh, this makes it feel really hard, because I can't have this with you guys all the time. You know, I can't have this every day. So it was a bizarre, but like the most amazing experience. Like the fact that I was playing with, you know, in front of people that actually like listen to my music and really like love what I'm about was just like an amazing
surreal
feeling.
It's very surreal.
It was so surreal. And it was just like, I had these moments where I would go back to my hotel room and I was like exhausted, I was tired, and I would just like have these moments where I'm like crying, because I was just so like, I don't know, like I felt so like alone, because I was like, no one is really experiencing this like I am. But I also was like this, I was so like grateful, because I felt so like at home. I was like, this is what I have spent years preparing myself for. This is what I've spent years, you know, playing empty rooms and DJing in the corner of a bar to become a better DJ, and taking that internship so I could be a better producer, and like, you know, all these things that I had done, taking a second job so I can pay for this, that, and the other, you know, like I was like, all of this stuff that I've been doing like has gotten me to this point where I feel now I'm just like, I'm in my element. I'm playing shows every night. I love it. And also like, I'm going to be real, like there are definitely shows sometimes that don't meet your expectations, you know, like you want them all to be rammed, you want them all to be busy, but sometimes you go and play a show, especially in a market that you haven't been exposed to, and it won't be busy. And like for me, those moments are kind of like, they're great. They're I mean, every artist hates it, but
they're like driving moments, like
and it's very like, and it's very humbling, you know. It makes you be like, okay, well, you know, I need to this is something I need to work on. This is something that I need to progress and make better, or like, and also playing to an empty room, that's always the hardest gig. Playing to an empty room is tough. And I think playing those empty rooms in Oz definitely made me a better performer in terms of playing full rooms, you know. Full rooms are like, this is
you
This
have
is
to pull
easy
the
because we're all like
energy out from
vibing.
nothing, you know? Like
Yeah.
you're looking there and there's maybe like 4 to 10 kids there and you're like, "Okay, I have
Mhm.
to close my eyes and imagine myself in a packed out room," because when the energy's there, you feed off of each other and it just elevates higher together. But when
Yeah.
one like component isn't there, you have to like pull that out of yourself. And then when you pull
Yeah.
that out of yourself and put it in a packed room, it's like over the wall.
Yeah, and the thing that I love is like, say there are like those 10 people there, like the difference is too, like I can actually connect with all 10 of these people. You know, we can, there's only 10 of us here and we can have this moment together, and that is super rare. You know, that doesn't happen very often, and it's kind of like, I don't know, I love doing that sort of stuff too because I can play off them. I'm like, "Oh, you like this? Okay, hang on, I'm going to change my whole set. Let's go here for a while. Let's go here for a while," you know, and like kind of play off that, which is really fun. But yeah, the tour was an amazing experience for me, and I really loved it. But going
Yeah.
back to the whole visa part of things, so I mean, just kind of long story short, to get a visa, like there's a lot of components, and it costs a lot of money. So it can
Mhm.
cost anywhere from, you know, 5,000 US plus
Yeah.
to get a visa
Which
that
is
lasts
insane considering
that
booking
lasts
fees
like
for
a
an
year
up
and a
and coming
half.
artist. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's I guess for a year and a half, and then also like on top of that, like the flights to get to America, setting up a new apartment, buying furniture, or even like if you're touring and just getting Airbnbs or anything
Yeah.
like that, you pay for all your flights, you pay for all your accommodation, your fees, you give out percentages to your managers and agents. So, you know, it's really like it's an expensive exercise to get the visa, and then also the process of getting a visa. So there's a few different categories. So one category is you have to have letters of recommendation from
Okay.
people who are high up in the industry. So like, you know, you need to have a signed letter by Excision saying that this artist is worthy enough to come to the States and play shows. You
Is
need
that
to show
something
them
that you
your
had done? Or like is that like for your letters of recommendation, did you have like an agent or did you have another artist like vouch for you?
mm, so I think you have to have like something like 10. So you can't just have one. So you have
Okay.
like, I had a mix of like managers, agents, labels, artists, you know, you kind of throw everything
Crazy.
in the mix there.
Yeah.
And then you have to show all your social media following and sort of prove, okay, I have a following in the States that
Mhm.
will want to come to my show. You have to prove for the whole length of the visa that you have shows. So if your visa is a year and a half, you have to say, here's my year and a half of shows. And this is why I have to be there for a year and a half. You have to show the income from that shows to be like, I'm earning enough to like pay tax and blah, blah, blah. And then I'm not sure if anyone's watching this who is a visa lawyer, please, I actually don't know. I am obviously not a lawyer, so I don't know like everything, but these are kind of the bits and pieces. And then the other things are, oh, you need to be releasing on, say, like US labels, just to get that out there. And then you have
Mhm.
to have articles of press, and the press articles, you know, you can obviously do some that are from blogs and blah blah, but you need to have um like I don't even know how to explain it, but like big, like mainstream press. So things like Billboard or Rolling Stone, or like sponsorship from Nike, or like, you know, those corporations that are either really big in the US or really big
Mhm.
globally. So it's
God,
a
what
lot
a
of work to get that.
process.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's why sometimes it takes years for artists, because they may have a huge following in the States, but they're not being covered by certain press, or, you know, they might not have a big social media following, but heaps of people are listening to them on Spotify, you know, like there are so many factors. And if you have, you know, a lot of one, but none of the other, they're like, well, we're not going to let you come over here and play. So it's definitely a huge process, and it's really
Yeah.
hard.
Oh
So that
gosh.
was definitely that I remember the day that my visa got approved. And for the first time, we had actually sectioned out about 3 months for me to go to the US and tour. And as we got closer to time, Harrison was just like, look, Sips, like, you're just not at that point yet where we feel confident that the visa will go through. So
Mhm.
we're going to have to wait. And, you know, I remember at that time, I was actually in this room when he told me, sitting at this desk. And I just remember like getting down on the ground and just like crying into the carpet, because I just, you know, I felt like it was so close. And
Mhm.
anyway, obviously kept going and did everything that we could. And then
Yeah.
finally we went to the actual visa. And I remember I was sitting in like the airport on this lounge, and Harrison called me. And like usually he'll text just to be like, are you up? Because we're in such different time zones. And
Yeah.
he just called me straight away, and I was about to get on a plane to go to New Zealand. I was like, oh, I better answer this. I was in the middle of an Oz tour, and he was like, hey, did you see your emails? I was like, no. And he was pretty much like, your visa got approved. And I just like in the middle of the airport, just
Tears.
crying my eyes out. I cried the whole flight to New Zealand. Like I called my mom, and she was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I was just like, I just was so happy. And like, it had been years in the making, and just finally having that was just like, for me, I like remember that day, like, I don't know, I remember just that feeling of being in that airport and feeling so silly because I'm like tears down my face, and everyone's kind of like, are you okay? Because I was like kind of like smiling but crying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
You never
so
know. I've done
yeah,
that in public too.
it's hard getting to the States.
Oh
Yeah,
my
you're
goodness.
like, is she okay? Should I help her? But she kind of looks okay with it. Like,
Yeah. That's so
anyway.
insane, but it's like such a journey. And like, I totally can resonate with that because I just feel like people just don't understand sometimes. And some people who, just love the, consumer based, just love to listen to EDM. They just don't understand how long, a states based or not a states based artist just puts so many years of like blood, sweat, tears into
Mm,
this just to get like one yes on like one matter such as your visa, because I feel like we're given so many areas where we just have like self-doubt, or we're told no by labels, or we're told no
oh,
by X, Y, and Z.
the
So
self
it's like
doubt is,
I feel like our mind just organically goes to preparing yourselves for the worst thing to happen. So when the best
mm,
thing does happen, you're just like, this isn't real. This isn't real.
yeah,
Da, 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 da.
yeah,
Oh, that's so amazing.
100%.
And
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing. I think like with I don't know. I think sometimes Americans don't understand. Well, not to, I just kind of, while we're on the topic, I feel like they don't understand sometimes how lucky they are. Because, like, say, for example, like here in Oz, like we have a bass music scene here that's really cool.
yeah.
But it's not, we don't have that many shows. We're very much a niche genre that you can't, make much of a living off of it out here. It's just more that we have like a really cool, like we have a really cool community around it. But I think like for us to get to the States, it takes so much work. And I think that's why once a lot of, for example, Aussies get there, they are really successful because they're used to that kind of work ethic. They're like, in order for me to get here, I had to do all of this, So like once you're there, it's kind of like you're a bit of a well-oiled machine. You're like, I know how to, like play shows whilst riding on a plane, whilst not getting sleep, whilst, like all that sort of stuff. So I think that sometimes like works in their favor. And like there are so many incredible American artists that are out there absolutely killing it. And then I also see some artists out there that I'm like, who are just starting out and their first show is to like 1,500 people. And I'm like, they love it. Obviously, everyone loves
They're
it.
so
And you're just kind of in
fortunate.
this
It's just
point
a
where you're
fortunate
like,
thing.
yeah, there's a part of you that's like, it took me, years to get in front of that many people, because in Oz, we just don't have that amount of people. But not saying it's good or bad, but it's just like, I guess the journey to get there is completely different,
It's so different.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But that tour was amazing.
And I just feel like what you guys have over there, just kind of what you elaborated on it being a niche community. I feel like all of the artists are very tight over there. And you guys are, all fairly friends with each other, because I see like every time I see like Lucille Croft's name, I'll see like Slumberjack's name, and then I'll see your name, like the same people getting rotated. Because so explain to me what is going on there right now, because I have an understanding that there are shows in some places, but there are not shows in other places. Or have you guys completely opened up?
So the thing that's been hard here, and anyone who follows me on social media has probably seen a little glimpse of it, but the thing that's quite hard here is we've been like really good with our COVID management, I think.
Oh my
on
gosh,
a global scale, you can kind of see it. Yeah. So I guess you know, we had a big spike around April, May of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went into major lockdown and everything shut down. Everyone stayed home. And then we essentially eradicated cases to the point where once we were having 0 cases, we opened everything. Well, when I say we opened everything back up, it was sort of like we slowly opened things back up. You know, cafes opened up, restaurants opened up. Everything was still socially distant, or it had to be outdoors and things like that. But we have quite strict international quarantine. So to get into the country, so I mean, I know there's a few exceptions to this, but like it's not like just anyone can come into the country. You have to be returning Australian citizen, or there are some exceptions when it comes to like work visas and things like that. So to get into the country, you have to do a strict 2-week hotel quarantine. So from the airport, you're escorted by either the police or the army, you know, in buses straight to the hotel. You don't interact with any of the outside world. And then you're in a hotel room for 2 weeks. And some are a bit more like, you know, some have, actually, I don't even know if they have balconies anymore, but like, it's like you're in a room for 2 weeks sort of thing.
Yeah.
You might get out once a day, and it's super strict. And the hotel workers, they all have to, I guess, kind of separate themselves. They have to have COVID tests all the time, that sort of thing. Which has been amazing, because when you look at the amount of people in hotel quarantine who have COVID, like there's actually a lot of people coming back who have COVID.
Yeah.
Whereas locally, we don't have any. Once we kind of did that big lockdown, and we've had a couple of outbreaks since where we'll have like 50 cases or something. But once everyone's sort of in that hotel quarantine bubble, because we don't have any locally transmitted infections, we can just kind of go out and do things as normal. Now, some states, some of the states work a little bit differently. So there is like a national standard when it comes to like hotel quarantine and things like that. But say, for example, my state, New South Wales, they're very strict on contact tracing. So every venue you go into, you have to scan a QR code and say, hey, this is my name, this is my number. And that's how, if we've ever had an outbreak, they isolate everyone that has been in contact. So, okay, this person had COVID and they met up with these people who met up with these people. Okay, here's 400 people that have all been in contact and they've not contacted anyone else. You all have to go into 2-week isolation. And, you know, New South Wales continues as normal, but these 400 people are in isolation. So for 2 weeks, they can't leave their houses. So that means if they all get COVID, it's fine, but they don't spread it to anyone else.
But that's amazing.
That's kind of been our thing. Yeah. But in other states, they haven't been as strict with contact tracing, for example. And most of them will just kind of shut their border to the other states if there's an outbreak there, right?
Okay.
So the thing is, some of the states have been having shows. They've just shut their borders and they've just been having shows the whole time as if normal.
Okay.
And then my state, like, we haven't had any cases in, I think, 2 months now, or around 2 months. We haven't had any cases at all, like 0 cases. We had a little outbreak of like 50 people before that. But they're still not allowing full-fledged shows. We're not allowed to dance. We're not allowed to stand up and drink, you know, and you're like, and we haven't had a single case, but it's just because I think they want to stay on top of, they don't want it to explode, which I understand. And for the majority of people, it works. DJs doing my sort of thing definitely is not ideal, but there are other states who are doing shows as of normal. So Queensland have been, and I'm about to, this week, I'm actually announcing a run of shows, which is really exciting. So I'll be heading up to, there's a couple in different states, but there's definitely quite a few in Queensland because they've been doing shows as normal. Melbourne have been doing shows as normal. Perth have been doing shows as normal. So there's definitely been like some shows here. It's just not as normal because it's sort of like you run the risk of you plan a show and then there's an outbreak and everything gets shut down. So it's been a little tough, but slowly now we're starting to have shows again. But I guess like it's just very conservative over here in terms of like they just don't really take chances. And I'm like, we haven't had a case in so long, just let us
It's
go back to
just so
raving, like,
different from the States, like, approach to it, and I understand, like, density, population, and all that stuff is so different, like, logistic-wise,
Mm,
but I feel like even though it sucks the way that you all have done it, for, like, our profession, at least I feel like hopefully you all won't be moving backwards. You're just moving forwards from here on out.
yeah,
And when everything is open, it will be open. The only thing that has saved our country is the vaccine and the amount of vaccines that they're starting to implode in, because herd immunity and contact tracing and all of that went out the door about 3 weeks into March of 2020. So,
yeah,
and it's so divided. I know you all probably see via the news and all of that stuff. It's so divided from state to state. So I live in Florida,
mm,
and for the most part, we act like we never shut down. And
yeah,
yeah, and then you see
100%.
states like Texas and Arizona and Louisiana all in this past week have said we're going to take things like, we still have a mask mandate, and private properties can say, okay, we have a private property, like I have a residency as well, and if you don't wear a mask, you get kicked out, all of that kind of stuff. But I guess, Texas and Louisiana and Arizona have now opened up at 100%, no mask mandate,
Oh
done.
my
And
god.
which is a little bit, I think,
It's
jumping.
just wild for me to hear because it's just
Yeah,
so it is worlds apart. Like
it's worlds
it just
apart.
is really different.
Yeah,
Yeah, and look, again, as you said, like density wise, like we don't have that many people per the amount of space we have in the country. Like really, I think the population of Australia is close to the population of like Southern California.
yeah,
Like we have no people, so it is a lot easier to keep it under control. And I guess like I think culturally Australians are a bit more aligned. Yes, it's a bit like it's different state to state. And you have seen in some of the outbreaks like how that's affected things, but culturally, I think Australians are a bit like, oh, fuck, we don't want to lock down and I might be safe, but it's not really about me. If we all just do this for a little while, then we can go
hmm
back to being normal, which is really how it sort of happened for us. But it does mean you have to have a lot of trust in the processes and the government and we're not even going to get into that whole conversation, but I can understand why in America that's, so fragile, that kind of trust.
yeah,
And I think another thing that we had over here in Australia is during COVID, we had so Australia, the government had, I guess you guys call it like welfare, right? Sort of
yeah,
like a
like
welfare
unemployment
system.
or a stimulus
Yeah,
package. Yeah.
yeah. So we had two different types. So there was one type, which was if you lost your job, it was a increased amount during COVID.
hmm
And then the other type was if it was for businesses or people who ran their own business.
Yep.
And it was if your revenue was down 30%, you got given this amount of
X
money
amount of
per,
money.
per
Yes.
fortnight
Yeah.
as your income, right?
Yes.
So it meant that, so for me, as working for myself, it meant if I earned $0, I would get that money from the government.
Yeah.
But what it meant for businesses was, okay, we're 30% down in revenue. I have that money to pay my staff so I can keep them on. So the difference was, say for example, someone's income for, I don't know, a fortnight was $2,000, and say the government gave 1,400 for the 2 weeks.
Okay.
It meant that the employer only had to pay $600 because the government was giving $1,400. So they're like, oh, I only have to pay $600 to keep this staff member on.
hmm
So it encouraged businesses to stay open whilst they weren't earning as much money or any money. And it also encouraged people to stay home. You know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
whole thing with this COVID, with the lockdowns was you have to stay home. And so many people were like, I can't afford not to work because I can't pay my bills and I can't do all this stuff. Whereas for us, it was like, I can afford to stay home. Businesses were like, I can afford to keep my staff at home because, we had this kind of support. And I think that made a really big difference. And
Absolutely.
honestly, I look at some, American artists and I'm like, how are you still alive? How are you still paying rent? Like there's so many expenses that I'm like, that honestly like scares me. And then to put on top of that, the whole fact that our health system is, completely free, and well, you can pay for more, and that's a whole nother thing. But, like, there are so many stresses that I'm like, that would just be like, well, do I not have enough money to pay to have a roof over my head, or do I go out during COVID to work? It's,
I mean,
I
I
don't
think
know.
that was the major downfall of our country handling this, is kind of what you just elaborated on, is the fact of many factors that our healthcare isn't free. If you per se came down with COVID, like if our parents caught COVID and they were ill immune and they had to go to the hospital, they could have a bill up to $20,000 when they left. And it's like,
I just cannot. I
and
just
and
can't.
then on
I
top
don't
of
know.
that, it's like, while your country was able to, provide for you, that encouraged people to stay home. It encouraged the help to small and independent cell phone businesses. They
Mm-hmm.
kind of made us choose between, okay, we're going to do the morally right thing, and we're going to be behind on our bills. And even though they're not making us pay them, and they're taking back the opportunity for landlords to, throw people out of their residences, when everything's back to normal, you still owe that money. Like for me, for my student
Exactly.
loans, my private loans have been paused, but the second my private loans are unpaused, then I have a higher interest to pay. So it's like, it's
Mm,
all like, okay, I just feel like the whole entire United States has handled this kind of like a false sense of security. Like, for instance,
mm.
at like our theme parks, they have you wear masks, but when you get on a ride, you're sitting next to the person, and it's like, then you're able to take your mask off, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
what? Like, I just don't understand this. Or like, you go to like an essential business and there's no capacity, and now in certain states you don't have to have a mask on, so now there's people walking around our Publixes without masks on, and
The
it's
thing
just
that the thing that I know I tweeted about this once, but I just thought it just logistically does not make sense. So businesses, I mean restaurants, who are like, you can't eat. So they were saying that you can't eat indoors, right?
yeah,
Because it's all going
correct,
to spread and all this stuff. And
yeah,
obviously, while you're eating, you can't wear a mask.
mm-hmm.
So they were like, okay, you can only eat outside. Now, you hear that and you're like, that makes sense. Like here
Yeah,
to be like, okay, everything's really spread out. You're outside. You're not coughing on other people. Like,
yeah,
I get that, right? But then in America, it's like, I saw the photos of like, they have outdoor dining with the tents, so
yeah,
you can eat outside. And I'm like,
because it's
this
so
is the exact
cold because
same
of
thing.
winter. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, this is the same thing as eating inside.
And they
It's
have heaters
like,
inside the tents, and the heat is circulating, and there's no actual air ventilation system like you would
oh
be
my God.
inside with an actual AC and the air being ventilated. So the heat is just
Oh my God.
rising, and everybody's breathing out, and it's rising, and it's staying in the tent. And you're just like, what
So
is going
crazy.
on?
What? How does this make any sense?
It
So yeah,
and it
I don't
just
know.
like, it doesn't, but I'm just so thankful that, like, even though I guess you've seen, obviously EDM Twitter is very kind of divided on how they
I'm
feel.
just gonna be honest. ADM Twitter in general just scares me. As an Aussie, we don't really use it, so
It's
I
so
get on there and
scary.
I'm just like, I am so scared. Like I'm like, I feel like I'm doing nothing wrong, and yet I'm probably still gonna get cancelled for something, even though I don't
For
even know what I
something, you're
like.
just like, I'm like scared to promote like a pre-save link, because I'm like, maybe the artwork, maybe this, maybe my username. I have no idea. And
Yeah, the things that have come up this week that have popped up, and I'm like, I didn't know that was a thing, and I could get cancelled over this thing or that thing. I don't know. Like,
it's like your anxiety levels just go from like 1 to like 2
yeah.
billion the second you open an app and see any of your friends getting called out. You're like, fuck, okay, goodbye. And it's like, I guess, because like I've seen like a downgrade in my engagement or whatever, but it's like, I don't even want to be on there if it's gonna be as toxic as it is, because it's just like,
Yeah.
you can go on there and I feel like it can just like ruin your like mental capacity
Mm,
to approach
yeah.
other things. And
Yeah.
I just hope, I mean, obviously, like, it co-aligns with, like, Los Angeles is the most shut down place in the United States right now. It just is. That's just
Hmm.
how the cookie crumbled, and I totally understand it. And that's where you had your apartment, right? You were living in LA.
Yeah.
So
I was living in LA. Yeah.
so it's very like, I guess people get mad if you're not wearing it when you walk your dog. They'll get like very kind of, the homeless problem is a huge ordeal. I mean, I just remember
Yeah.
seeing the stuff with the outdoor dining. Like, I mean, LA is such an eclectic, like, cultural place. And half of what makes LA is like the independent restaurants and the independent stores,
Yeah.
the comedy shops. And then it was like these people kind of invested like $100,000 to $150,000 to build these outdoor patios. And then they were told they couldn't have outdoor dining again. But all of like the film crews would have outdoor dining right next door to the outdoor places. And it's just like,
Yeah.
it's literally insane. But yeah, like everybody there really doesn't agree with shows per se. And then you have, you know, people like Modestep. I had Josh on, and it's like he's not here on a visa too, and he didn't go home. Obviously, he stayed here, and it's like they have to make money off of their visa. They don't have another way to make money, so it's just kind of like a hard run around.
Yeah, that's the
cycle.
thing too. If you have a visa, you have to earn money in what you like applied for the visa for.
Yeah.
So when people are like, oh, just get a job at Starbucks. Well, first of all, it's COVID. Should Starbucks really be open? And second of all, like you physically are not allowed to. You can get deported, you know. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a tough one. I mean, like I'm probably like not really going to weigh in on it, but you know, obviously over here we have shows, and right when COVID was like absolutely booming, the fact that, you know, I would see all these shows, and I live in a completely different world over here, you know, like we're not allowed to have shows and we haven't had cases for 2 months, you know what I mean? So it's like it's a whole different thing, and on the one hand, like you see everything absolutely crumbling over there, but then there's still all this stuff happening and people going out to shows, and it's just kind of like, well, you know, like let's see kind of why this is happening. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I also was going to say, you know how you were talking about obviously you guys have now got this vaccine rollout and you know, all that sort of stuff. Australia obviously had no what do you call it, like we didn't have any sense of urgency when it came to the vaccine, because it's like, well, we don't have COVID here, so like we don't really need the vaccine. And it was great for us because it meant we could wait, you know, like vaccines started, I don't know, maybe November, December. And Oz was like, cool, let's just see how this goes. And if they all start turning into fucking zombies, we're not going to use it, you know, like, and it was good because it gave us like plenty of time to just be like, and the only reason I think it's happening now in Australia is so that we can look to international travel, you know, and not have these strict hotel quarantine measures in place. In terms of like our local, you know, what's going on locally, it's not really as much of an issue for us, but yeah, it's more for international, which is exciting. I think we just started vaccinating a couple of weeks ago
which is awesome.
over here, so which is cool. But yeah, it's not, you know, for us, we were like, we can take our time with this. We're not like,
oh, definitely. Here they're like, as many people get vaccinated as quick as you possibly can, because it's literally
which I totally get.
Yeah,
I totally get that, you know, like it makes sense. But yeah, here it's like, no, we'll wait, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I understand that too, because I've had a multitude of people I know get vaccinated for, because states are handling it differently. Some states do like age and above, or they do, okay, if you're a school teacher, you're working with children who are in contact with their parents, or like frontline workers, firefighters, police officers. And I really haven't heard of anybody having like a bad reaction from it. I've heard like a few people, but definitely there's like a sense of urgency I feel like there is here, just because people are just so mentally over it. And I just don't,
100%.
you know,
and there are so many things to weigh up in this whole thing, because, you know, like there is everything from, okay, obviously getting COVID and all that sort of stuff, but then you look at the mental health aspects of it. You know, you look at economy, finances, how people are going to come back from this years in the future, you know, like that sort of thing. And you know, there's definitely a lot of different things to weigh up on it. And also, like, I know, you know, and again, when you get on Twitter, it is like just a whirlwind of shit just being
You're
thrown
very
out there.
scared to say your thoughts. I just feel like it's very hard to have like a two-sided conversation nowadays with like both parties being kind of neutral by the time you walk away. It's like, oh, if you don't
Mm.
agree with me in my train of thought, you're literally a horrible fucking person.
Yeah, I actually recently listened to a podcast on this, and it's a way of communicating, and I think that's something that nowadays is, and especially on some platforms, is kind of lacking. And it is up to, you know, part of it is the way that you convey that information, but the other part is how you receive that information. So, you know, it was kind of talking about, you know, when you talk to people, like sort of acting as if you're a scientist. So like, and this podcast, for anyone who's interested, it's the Rich Roll podcast. I can't remember the name of the episode, but
I've
it's
listened to a few
quite recent.
episodes. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah,
You'll have to send it to me. I
he's
love
amazing.
listening.
I'll send it to
Yeah.
you. Yeah. So it was just quite interesting because it was more about like, and I guess this is the way that I sort of take things. It's like, okay, if there's some information put in front of you, it's like, okay, explain to me how, why, rationale, you know, all that sort of stuff. And then you don't have to be like, well, fuck this or fuck that. Like it can just be like, okay, like now I'm informed. And I think, I guess when it comes to say Twitter, like I wouldn't say I'm overly, I don't know if I'm overly active. I'm still trying to learn it. I know that sounds weird, but like for Aussies, we don't use it. So I'm just kind of like,
No, it
hello.
doesn't. I
like,
just don't want to be
know?
on it at this point.
Yeah. So like just little things like that. But like for me, I think like I don't necessarily like post as much opinion stuff on there. Like for me, it's more like if I, you know, have a conversation with someone, like that's the opportunity that we both get to hear each other's opinion, to talk about it, and to come to whatever resolution. Now, like that doesn't mean that in that conversation I am right, you're right. We just talk about it. I could walk in with one opinion and walk out with a completely different one. But for me, like that's one of the things that, you know, I like, that there's that, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like you only get to experience that if you're like here with me, if you get what I mean. Like that's why I like podcasts and things like that, because I'm like, you know, this is an opportunity for you to like hear my thoughts on it, I guess. But like I don't really go out every day and start talking about, especially with shit that I don't really know about. I don't know a lot, you know, like, you know,
people don't know a lot in general, and they like assume they know a lot, and it's just like to be able to have a conversation with someone where it's like, I just feel like it's healthy. Like I was raised to like understand that having friends that have different beliefs or different morals or different X, Y, and Z than you, and bring something of a different side to a certain situation, is like good to see both sides and be able to take both sides into your mind and like take that accountability.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, especially like during all this COVID stuff, you know, like headlines come out and bits and pieces get thrown, and people latch on to the thing that either they like the sound of the most, or maybe makes most sense to them, or they can rationalize the best, or they've experienced and all that sort of stuff. But when I was at university, I studied applied science. It was in exercise and sports science, and one of our or like quite a big chunk of our degree was all about research, and how to critically analyze research. So it wasn't just like, oh, okay, like this scientific paper. So it was all on, a lot of it was on health. So it was like, this scientific paper is telling me that this is good for your health, right? So, I mean, a lot of people nowadays wouldn't even go to the scientific paper. They would go, oh, you know, New York Times posted this, must be right. Or my friend who I really trust posted this, it might be right. You know, oh, and she's really into health. Like, but if you know, this is taking it one step further. Okay, here's a published research article about it, and this is what they're saying. Part of the degree was not just reading that, but was going, okay, let's read this research article. What are the things that are good about it, and what's bad about it? You know, like, where are the holes in this? Okay, yeah, they're saying it's good, but look at how they only tested on 5 people. You know, look at how, you know, and it was really, and yeah, and when you start getting into research like that, it makes you realize that the world isn't necessarily in absolutes, and also you're less likely to kind of just jump onto, okay, that information's been spat out. You know, you get a bit more like, tell me more about that, you know. And that's why plenty of things come up and I just go, I'm not even interested in researching about that, you know, just let that go through. And I think, you know, like it's hard to, I guess so many people are spitting out so much information, and I know there's been this whole big thing at the moment about, you know, what information is fact and what's not, and, you know, how is social media trying to get on top of that, and it's a big clusterfuck of information, you know what I mean?
It's
But
huge problem in the States, like politically and medically. Like the fact that our medicine and health has been politicized is a huge problem. It's so bad.
100%. And it gets to a point where people don't trust anything, and so they're told something and they just go, nah, you know. And the thing is, I think it is good to ask questions. You know, when the vaccine is coming out, and, you know, people are going, what's in the vaccine? How did it get approved so quick? Blah, blah, blah. I'm all for asking questions, but I'm also like, don't say, you know, like a lot of people go like, the vaccine was put out so quick, therefore it's unsafe, therefore this. I'm like, well, you're making all these assumptions without actually looking into the processes. Now, I'm not saying it came out quick. I don't know enough about the vaccine. I actually, being in Australia, I'm like, I'm a bit like I'm safe over here. And once there's an opportunity for me to have the vaccine, I will then look into like all of that sort of stuff. But, you know, for me, I'm like, I'm not even worrying about that yet. But, you know, when I'm looking at it, like, there's a lot of information, or there's a lot of processes that went behind fast tracking vaccines years ago. It wasn't about COVID. They weren't just suddenly like, oh, COVID's here, we have to fast track things.
No.
Years ago, they came up with processes that meant if a vaccine needed to be fast tracked, it could. And not only that, but it also went into, you know, because then people were like, well, why wasn't this vaccine fast tracked, and why wasn't this, you know, when you look at it on a global scale, what is the priority? Okay, yes, fast tracking this vaccine might help these people, but, you know, you have to prioritize things, you know, and this has been a complete shift in the world. So I don't know. And again, like, it's not that I know a lot of information on all of those bits and pieces. It's not really about, you know, I'm just more sort of trying to explain that I think people need to be a bit more conscientious when it comes to really researching correctly. I mean, I don't know, for me, like, in this day and age, I think the most valuable people are, well, I guess a couple of things I'll have to throw in there, but like hardworking, but also like people who are good problem solvers and good researchers. I think no matter what job you're in, if you have those three things, you can be successful in it. Because you are solving whatever the problem is, and you're being conscientious in researching in that.
I feel like, yeah, no, you said it better than I would. It's absolutely just a form of questioning, and there's nothing ever wrong with questioning. And I think the fact of problem solving kind of really applies to what happened to us when our main source of income was taken away a year ago. And it was like, how are you going to figure it out to make, you know, another source of income without having to leave your field? And that was like a kind of hurdle that we had to jump over. And I know you had just finally come to the States, so it may not have been the exact case in your wind, but when we went into COVID, did you ever really have a moment where you're like, what the fuck am I going to do? Do I have to adapt in this way, this way, this way? And your team kind of helped you, or were you just kind of on your own figuring it out?
I think I had probably like, I mean, I'm going to say almost like a year of that. Like it was a huge drastic thing for me, because obviously, like, when you work for so many years towards one goal and you get a taste of it and then it's taken away, you know, that's a big thing, because I think I always had, this is where I'm going, and suddenly the world went, you can't go there. Like, that's not even an option anymore. And so that was really hard. At the start, I had so many things that I had to kind of take care of. I actually just came to Oz for a 2-week holiday. So I had my whole apartment with all my belongings in the States that I had left there not realizing. And 2 days before I was meant to go back is when Harrison was like, do not go back to the States, stay in Australia. So, you know, like, I obviously had that whole part of it, which was say goodbye to your apartment and get your belongings all packed up and that sort of thing. And then it was also, well, like, okay, what are we going to do now during COVID? And there were definitely quite a few things. Having that welfare from, you know, being over here was great, because it did mean that the pressure was off in terms of how quickly I came up with, you know, with my solution for it. But I kind of jumped in straight away, and I just was like, all right, let's go. And I think a lot of people jumped into things straight away, and then I kind of watched them and was like, is that the move? Is this the move? Whilst I was still, at the end of the day, all I like, the one thing that stayed consistent was working on music, because no matter what, playing shows, not playing shows, working on music is really the priority. But then, looking at things like Twitch streaming or YouTube content or writing for others, or, like whatever it was. And like, I can definitely easily say that I think I went in the wrong direction for myself in some ways. I tried some things that I wanted to try, that I'm not saying that they weren't successful. I think they were, but not for me. It didn't quite work for me and how I kind of wanted to do things. And I think like last year I probably worked the hardest that I have ever worked. It was, I would roll out of bed at 8 a.m. and I would not leave my computer till 10 p.m. at night. And I did everything from building my own PC from scratch, and started Twitch streaming and learning how to do that, which was just a whole world of, I have no idea what this is about.
I love-hate relationship with Twitch.
Yeah, it was tough. Like, doesn't come naturally to me. So working that out was a lot, especially on a PC that I just built, which does not come naturally to me either. So, that was definitely a mess. And I think I kind of realized that wasn't really sustainable for me. And then I kind of moved off the whole streaming and being in front of people's faces all the time, because I was like, this is not, for me as an artist, this isn't conducive to what I want to be doing. And it's not that I want to connect with people, but I'm like, I want to connect with, it just didn't feel organic to me, in terms of, it was like, okay, I'm on here every week at this time, and, and it just didn't quite feel right. So, anyway, so then I think it wasn't until New Year's. So I had a run of shows that came up at New Year's, and we hadn't had cases for ages, and everything was open up. And then 10 days before my shows, they were interstate, and 10 days before my shows, we had a couple of cases pop up in New South Wales. All the borders closed, and it was just like COVID again. And that really broke me. And I know a lot of people saw this post I put up on Instagram, but it just was, it broke me. I think finally what happened after COVID was, I just went, if I just work my ass off, it's all going to be fine. Just work, and do nothing but work. And I think finally at that moment, I just let the weight of everything just finally catch up with me. And I just was, I was just honestly like a pit of depression. I just was like, what is the point? I worked so hard. I've worked so hard for years and years to like make this dream happen. And I was like, why do I do it? Like, I'm exhausted. I'm sick. Like, the anxiety and the stress was getting to a point where physically my body was just like,
it's mentally
breaking
draining.
down. Yeah. And I just kind of got to a point where I was like, what, and then, but I think the thing that I realized from all that is, I was like, so I have other things that I can jump into. I used to run a couple of businesses. I have my personal training certificates and did exercise sports science at uni. So, my mates were like, why don't you get into personal training, and why don't you do this and all this sort of stuff? And I definitely dabbled in ideas for all these sorts of things and businesses and all the rest. And when it came down to it, I was like, I can do those and I can jump into those, but do I, am I passionate, and do I really want to? And I finally got to the point where I was like, this music thing is not just for me to get to this point, to the States and touring or whatever my goal was. I'm like, this music thing is for life. This is what I want to be doing the whole time. So what does it matter if COVID's here and all this sort of stuff? Like, just, you want to do this, and you want to do it forever. And sometimes it's going to be amazing, and sometimes it's going to suck. And right now it just so happens to suck. But, like, this is what you want to be doing with your life. So I think from when I had that realization, which was actually probably a bit earlier than when everything shut down again, but once I had that realization, it was a lot easier, because I just was more at peace with what I was doing, and day to day working on music. And you know, and I've pushed into plenty of other things when it comes to working with music. I obviously do my artist project, but I do producing for other people and engineering for other people, and I love it. Like I love writing music. I write all sorts of music, and I really love it. And then I think towards this year, my whole thing was, okay, well, now that welfare is ending and we're not quite at a point where you're earning the same amount of money from music again, how are we going to combat it? And recently, like, to be honest, I actually am, I don't necessarily need to be doing that yet, because I'm now playing shows in Oz, and there
Yeah.
actually isn't a I don't know, there isn't a huge push for me to need to do it. But I've actually started working at a gym over here, at a F45 gym.
Cool.
So I coach there. Well, I've literally only just started, and it's pretty much on the times that I'm not playing shows. And when I actually look at it in terms of like why I did it, first I was like, oh yeah, you know, because I need to have like a steady income and blah blah. But now that shows are back, I'm like, I don't necessarily need that. But I realized the reason why I put that there was because, well, for a couple of reasons, but two of the main ones were, so I had, like, no matter what happened with music, and no matter if COVID happened again, if everything shut down, I still had this thing that at the end of the day, when I come back next week, it's going to be the same no matter how your career is going. And
Like a grounding.
your, yeah, your trainers are still going to be there, and they're still going to, you know, you're still going to be great mates, and everyone's there still working hard. And the other thing was actually like just to be around other people,
Yeah.
other people who are in completely different worlds doing their own thing. You know, here's this woman, she's a policewoman, and here's this guy who's, you know, a chef, you know, like all these different people who are just like coming in, spending some time and doing that sort of thing. And like, to be honest, when I look at it now, I'm barely really working there. A lot of it is purely just for that reason, just to be like, okay, like here's, I don't know, here's this whole grounding thing that shows me there's a world outside of what's happening for you. So that was the most roundabout way to talk about that topic.
No,
But
that was perfect.
pretty much I
Yeah.
definitely jumped around with so many different things. And to be honest, I did realize that, like, not to like toot my own horn, but I had very, like, a lot of different ways to make money. But it I think this was the time when I actually, like, this is when I got really serious about what I'm doing about music. This is when I
Yeah.
was like, this is, you can't feel like you're moving forward, and you can't feel like you're making money, but you're still choosing to be here every day. And I think that was kind of the most important breakthrough for me, because it made me realize that makes it more obvious for me about how to go about things long term, and what sort of things I should be pushing into, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And it's like you more than most people like understand that this whole like career path is long term. And if you look at it like a
Mm,
marathon instead of a sprint, you're going to be in a lot better position mentally. And even though this last year has felt like such a long eternity, it is temporary and it will end.
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
everything will get back to normal like it is now. And, you know, by this time next year, it'll be like nothing ever happened, fingers crossed. and
Yeah.
and to find that
Hopefully, for sure.
balance is like so important as well, because my boyfriend, he kind of had that conversation with me because I did the same thing that you did. I was like, all
Mm,
right, there's no shows, there's no anything. I can just sit in front of my computer from dusk to dawn and write and work on stuff and create new concepts and get the podcast rolling and do everything that I'm passionate about. And like, I want to say like July, I hit this wall where I was just mad at everyone. I was mad at everything. I
mm,
didn't understand, you know, why I was just like cranky to him, cranky to my roommates. I just wanted to be left alone. And
yeah.
he was like, you know, you guys don't understand that even though, you know, it's not a substance problem or an alcohol problem, it's just like having an addiction to the gym. You guys have an addiction to playing shows and being around this culture of people. And when you get into that, and it's like something that you had such a big taste of once you came over to the States, it's very hard. Like, I have a residency and I was playing out of state, you know, every other weekend. And when you kind of take that all away, and you take the festivals away, and you take the friends and human interaction and these online friends that become in real life friends at festivals, and you're so excited to see them, and then nothing happens for a year, you're left with this like empty space, and you think you can just
Mm,
work through it and push through it, but you have to have that balance. And that's when like the gym, I totally understand the gym thing. I was doing like these left wing. That's honestly like why I kind of push through with the podcast, because even though it still has to do with like Lizzy Jane, I'm not like writing music sitting here. Like it's a brain break for me, and I love talking to people like you, because like what you said about how you love podcasts is just it gives you this opportunity to listen to somebody unfiltered, where you're not going back and forth with someone on a text-based platform or X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
You just hear them talk. And that's just really nice. But I'm very happy for you that you know you found this kind of like stability balance where you just kind of can let your energy out no matter what changes within this industry, because I think that's really important. And it's like we've
Yeah, I think it's important for like people. I don't know, like it's definitely like an important thing for me. I mean, just like how a lot of my friends will hear, and just in general have nothing to do with music, you know, like they have such different worlds. And same thing, it's kind of like, okay, like this allows me to kind of put a bit of perspective into my life. And I really enjoy that. You know, I enjoy people not for what they do or what they look like or how much money they have. You know, I enjoy people for like who they really are. And, you know, it's important to like kind of surround yourself with a bit of that too, just to give you a bit of, you know, perspective. It definitely grounds you, but just kind of gives you a different view on everything, whether it's outside or isn't, even like when it comes to your own world as well. You know, I think that's kind of important.
I feel like you can get very lost in the music industry if the music industry is your whole life, and you can
Yeah.
kind of get, you know, wrapped up in all of the drama and this and X, Y, and Z. And to have those people who have completely separate lives, they may not even like EDM, is good because it gives you that grounding elsewhere. But
Yeah.
what you were saying about just kind of writing music over quarantine, have you gotten to experiment and just try all sorts of different genres? I know you got your music in a video game and like all sorts
Yeah.
of exciting
Fuck,
stuff.
I
What
forgot
game
about
was it
that.
in?
It was in Real Racing, which is like an EA Sports like
That's
car racing
huge.
game, which was
Yeah.
sick. Well, this was the thing I was actually going to say just before while we were talking about that, is that I think one of the other things that was big for me during COVID is, and this is something that my manager Harrison really like helped me with, is I think it was when I could finally, like, he sort of enabled me to finally start looking at myself seriously as an artist. Like I think like for me, like, and this happens I probably a lot with people who are constantly trying to push and progress and all that sort of stuff. Like you always look at where you want to be and how much better you want to be and what you need to improve on. And I guess like I kind of often miss, you know, like, and I know a lot of people say this to artists, to like look back at where you were versus where you are now. You know, that's something I really struggle with. And I have had friends and family where I'm like, hey, can you just like, I remember this one moment where I had this Nike sponsorship and they did this big campaign and I was up on this like ceiling to floor poster and I was in all the stores with, you know, this whole thing and on their website. And like, I remember at the event being like, when we go home, can you just make sure you like let me soak this in? And like we came home and they were like, look at this, like, you know, because otherwise sometimes you're so focused on the next thing that
You're so
you
focused on the
don't
next
realize
thing.
where you've yeah. And I think one thing that like Harrison helped me with a lot during this COVID year is, you know, I was jumping around being like, okay, well I have to like stream and be on socials and do Twitch because like that's how people, you know, like that's why people like me, or that's why people are connected to me and all this sort of stuff. I don't think I really gave my music, and I still don't, it feels weird to like even say this, but like, you know, I didn't really think that my music was, well, I still don't, because I know where I wanted to get to, but I don't think that my music is that strong. You know, I'm like, people don't like me for my music. It must be other things, you know, it must be shows and it must be streaming and all
And
this
you
sort
know,
of
I think
stuff.
that's
And
a girl thing. I think a lot of us think the same exact
yes,
way.
actually,
Yeah.
that is a good point, because, you know, I knew early on, well, I almost had the opposite early on. Early on I worked so hard on being a good DJ and all the rest, because I was like, people are going to assume I'm here because I'm a girl. And but then, you know, there are some times where I'm like, well, I'm just doing the same thing that guy did, but you're only noticing it because I don't look like the person you normally see here. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there is definitely that whole thing. And I think I went through, I guess Harrison and I were talking about our next lot of music and all this sort of stuff. And Harrison really is an amazing, incredible manager. He's been so awesome during all this, and he was like, you know, I was talking to him about everything, talking to him about socials, and I'd been away because I was having this fucking, like, I don't know, this whole breakdown kind of thing. And I'd been away and we were checking in because it was like, okay, next, you know, this year, what are we doing? How's everything going? And, you know, I was like, oh yeah, look, haven't really been posting and I've just been taking some time for me. And he's like, if you want to not post and just like once every now and then just be like, hey, still alive, still making music. He's like, that's fine. Like, fuck, like you're a music producer. That's what you do. And like, I think he just gave me this moment of like, you're an artist, you know, which like, it sounds silly because I always have been, but like, you know, I guess I maybe didn't take myself seriously enough in that point because I've gone from someone learning how to use Ableton to, okay, now you're an artist and you're releasing on these labels. You're there the whole time, so you don't really like see the major change. And I think he kind of helped me realize, like, and when it came to writing my music too, he was kind of like, this is your domain, this is the thing that you do, you know, go off and experiment and write stuff and write what you think is cool and what you like, which I mean, I think I've done for a long time anyway. But like, anytime I have self-doubt, he's like, you're like understand that, you know, people like your music and they like what you do. And I think I wasn't taking myself seriously enough in that respect pre-COVID. I was like, oh, okay, like I'm good, like I'm a good all-rounder and I'm a good businesswoman and I understand that I have to do this, that, and the other. But I was kind of underplaying what I do musically, and I still do because like I hear the things in my songs where I'm like, well, that's not very good, and your drum work needs to be better, and your mix sounds are not that great, and that bass, like you could have sound designed that better, you know.
Every
like I know where I
time.
want to be,
Yeah.
right? I know like, oh, this needs to be better. And I think he really helped me take myself seriously in that respect as an artist, which takes pressure off of other things, because you go, well, you know, yes, there are certain things that I do want to do, but it's like, you don't have to necessarily do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was something I was alluding to. You already asked a question and then I was alluding to that for
Oh,
some
no,
reason.
no, that's perfect. It's totally fine. I just feel like everything you're saying are the things that go through my mind every fucking day. So it's like
Yeah.
crazy. I get chills because it's like there are other people who feel the same way. And it's like me personally, like I just very easily internalize things instead of speak outwards. And then you just let it build up. And then it's like a mental breakdown and nobody knows where it
Yeah.
came from. And you're like, I've
Mhm.
been feeling this way for like upwards of a year.
Yeah.
And I just can't find the words to tell anybody because you're like, I know I've done so much, but at the same time, I feel like I haven't done anything. And I feel like I
Yeah.
have to go here and I have to be here. And like what you said about living in the moment and not living on socials. And it's like, you have to do with that with like your career too, of like, oh, I'm here in
Yeah.
this moment and I'm on the Nike poster and I'm on this and I'm on that. I mean, what was it like? Tell me the deal that happened with Nike, because that's so fucking cool. I only saw you
Yeah.
like post a tweet about it and I didn't know. And then I was like, damn, she's sponsored by
Yeah.
Nike. Holy shit.
It was from ages ago. Also, like, it's interesting hearing you say that you feel all these things. And I'm like, I haven't never talked to you, so I'm like, you can definitely, anytime you feel like that, just
I
message me. Because I
appreciate
feel like, especially
Oh.
when there are people that you're like, you get this. Like,
Yeah.
you can hear it from your mom, who's like, you are this and you are that. And you're like, yeah, but you don't know, like,
Yeah,
you're not a
no.
DJ, you're not a
Yeah.
label owner, you're not a, you know, but
Yeah.
they do know. But like, anyway, but yeah,
It's different.
so Nike was like, well, because I guess I didn't have as much of an American following when this was first coming up, so like plenty of people don't really know about it. But pretty much it came up because I actually, so like, I don't know, kind of like, I'll give you bits of the story, but pretty much the way it happened was I actually got a show with Adidas, or you guys call them Adidas, right?
Okay, yes.
Adidas. So they were doing this event, and this DJ pulled out last minute. And so at the time, my agent was like, look, can you play this show? It's like 9 hours of UK grime. And I was like, I love grime. So I was like,
Oh, yes.
yes, I'm
Yes.
so down. I'll do it. And I did it. And then from there, the guy who was the MC kind of poached me and was like, look, Nike want to do an event. Like, do you mind if I put you in for it? Because I think you did a great job. And I was like, would love that. And I've always very much resonated with Nike. I've been into sport and fitness since a kid, like that's
Yeah.
definitely, that's what I thought I was doing as a career, you know. So it's like, and I obviously like, so I still very much resonate with all that. So I played this gig for them, and I remember like, even I had to like, I was meant to be flying off somewhere, change my flights, because I was like, I just feel like this is really important. I feel like I need to be at this event. Anyway, they did this like soccer block party, which was like amazing. And I
That's
met
dope.
the Nike football team there, Nick Atkinson. He's an absolute legend. And he's like, he used to DJ in the UK and like used to like DJ drum and bass, which I fucking love. And I was like, oh my God. And so then I was like jumping into grime and drum and bass. Anyway, loved it. So then they were getting me to these events, which were mostly like drops for like soccer boots. You know, it was like, okay, mercurial event. It was like a soccer block party. And then this other one, which was inside a store. And like, I got on really well with them because we just kind of vibed in terms of music, and we vibed in terms of the culture. Like I played soccer from 5 years old. So I like really like understood all and loved it. So I started playing a few events with them, and then they had this campaign for the Soccer World Cup, which was essentially they were releasing the kit. But they wanted it not just to be football. They wanted it to kind of be like, you know, jumping into other sort of worlds and areas, to be like, it's not just about soccer players, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So they had me a part of that with Peking Duck and Montaigne, who are Australian artists in slightly different genres to me. And anyway, so we were part of this campaign. The campaign was like, they were doing the release of the World Cup kit, but it was also like, you know, there was an event which was like the unveiling and all the press were there, but then it was also like they did photo shoots where it was like they used that as their release, as their campaign. And for me, especially back then, like, well, even now, like I am terrible in front of the camera. And we had this like photo shoot with like the photographer from Australia's Next Top Model, and won't even tell you the story, but he was like, what the fuck is this girl? She does not, I just get so awkward in front of a camera. So I'm like, it was a nightmare. And it was like my first real experience in that sense. Like my photographer has always been like my best friend from high school, and I'm already awkward in his photos. So let alone this guy who I'm like, I don't even know you, and you're trying to take photos of me. And it was pretty funny because the photo that got approved was like, or that they liked at first, was like this one with me with a soccer ball under my foot, and I'm just kind of like this. And they were like, we can't approve this because you look more like a soccer player than the soccer players in the campaign. So they used this other one. Anyway, it was really awesome. So we did that whole thing, and it was really amazing to see. And then they did another campaign, which was the Women's World Cup. And we did the same thing. We did this whole drop, and I was way more comfortable that time when we did the whole photo shoot stuff, because I knew everyone there, and I was like, what can you do? You just got to like get into it. And that one was amazing because, well, both of them were, because so we have Rebel Sport here. I don't know what you guys have, which is similar, but it's like the big sports stores that are like,
okay, yeah.
Going to like,
I feel like we just have regular like Nike stores, Adidas stores, like just brand stores. Yeah. Or like Fit to Run, stuff like that.
Yeah. So I pretty much like, in all the stores, they had these like giant posters of me, like God, from what they'd taken from the campaign. And it was just like, it was this incredible experience. You know, like obviously like crazy. I didn't necessarily feel like, you know, the whole time you're like, I shouldn't be here. Why am I here? But it was amazing because it's such a big company, but like culturally, like it was really awesome. They have like, I guess, these subdivisions, and it was just kind of like, they were like, we can't not have you here. You are what we are. We represent each other. You know what I mean? Like, you understand us musically, you understand us. It wouldn't make sense to not like have you as part of the campaign, which was like a really amazing experience for that. And they looked after me so well. Like we had this one event in Melbourne that Studio Method produced, and it's like this big pyramid. Like it was like just this big pyramid in the middle of Melbourne, right next to the water, and it looked incredible. And inside it was a soccer pitch, and I was playing there every night for a week. And so then Nike Football were like, okay, you have to come to our store to pick up some gear for the week. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, okay, awesome. So I walk in, and they're like, cool. So here's your like, I guess, vouchers. So it's for their like their store, their employee store, right?
Okay.
So there's like certain things that you get access to, and they gave me this card to be like, this is what you have to pick up. And I read the card, and it was like, you cannot walk out of here unless you have minimum, you know, like 5 t-shirts, 5 pants, 5 jackets, 3 hats, 5 new pairs of shoes, and 2 complete outfits or something. And I was just like,
Oh my god.
oh my God. Like,
Here's
I
a
was
shopping
like,
spree in your dream shop. Like, there you
literally. And
go.
I got in there and I'm like picking all this stuff, and I brought my mum and my sister, and I was like, you guys pick like whatever you want. Like,
Yeah.
my mum picked these like Vapor Max Air Max shoes that she like loved, and everyone's like, you know, it was just like a really
Yeah.
amazing experience. They were so lovely and just like, I don't know, so supportive. And that was real. That was that moment where I like told my family, I was like, once I get home from this event, just really sit me down and be like, look at this, like, look at what happened and look at where you are versus where you were. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you have to do that. I don't do that enough. And you know, it kind of helps you get through that, or like
Yes.
kind of helps you realize where you're at. You know what I mean?
Because it's like what you said before. It's like the second something big is done, you're just on to the next thing. You're on to like,
Yeah.
okay, that's over and done with. We
Halfway
got
through
it.
it, you're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
here's the
I gotta
next
get
thing,
this
you know?
done. I gotta get that done.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And it's cool when you get to, because it's hard sometimes for like, I feel like our parents to resonate with like what we really do, because they wouldn't like generally like listen to the music, or they wouldn't like
Yeah.
do X, Y, and Z. But when you're able to kind of intertwine them in something that they like Nike, like this and that, and you're like, damn, like my child is supported to X, Y, and Z, to the fact that she's bringing me in
Yeah.
here and they're giving me a voucher because they love her. And I think that's really awesome when you're able to connect with like your parents understanding or knowing something that has to do with your career. And yeah, it's really, really cool. And that's awesome, like long term, to have a sponsorship with like such a big company.
Yeah, they honestly have been really amazing. And yeah, you're right in terms of like, I don't know, bringing your parents into it. It's been like a long journey, and
Mm-hmm.
it's been really hard. Like for my dad, it was really hard because he always worried about me, and I guess didn't really understand it as well.
It's the
And
same
my
thing for
mom,
my
I think
dad. Same thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
especially when I started, you know, I was DJing late nights in small nightclubs in Sydney. So he was definitely worried about me and didn't really understand the bigger picture of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that my mum necessarily did more so, it's just I guess she had a bit more trust in what I was doing. But it's funny, I think like a few people now like know my mum a little bit because she definitely comes to a couple of my shows. Her and my sister actually came out to the States when I played that
cool.
tour. So anyone who was at the Vegas show, my sister and my mum were there, like just having an absolute blast.
That's
So it
awesome.
was, yeah, so it's really cool when they also get to see that sort of stuff. They came to you know, they've been to shows in Oz from
Mm-hmm.
dating back from when I first started all the way up until, you know, some festivals later on. So, you know, it is cool to have them like experience that and see it and be a part of it. I think they're very grounding for me. Not that like my family is just like that, so I guess I'm more like that. But when I say grounding, like they're really supportive in terms of you know, making sure I'm on top of my health and I guess my routines and my schedule. And they're very like, you know, I'll tell them plenty of stuff, but it's not that they don't care about that, but they're focused on, am I looking after myself and that sort of stuff. They don't really worry about if I'm growing as an artist or if I'm earning lots of money. They're just more like, they understand how taxing this can be. And I'm not the type of person like you, like, as you've sort of said, I'm not the type of person to really like speak out and say things. And COVID has been a really hard time for that too, because I don't know, I feel like I've definitely put on a brave face and had my shit together, especially for a lot of my friends who, you know, arguably have been less affected by all this sort of stuff. So the whole time I've kind of been there supporting them and supporting other people. And it was hard for me to even say, you know, just personality wise, I'm not this type, but it was hard for me to say like, hey, I need help, you know? And I was like, I don't even know what that looks like. I don't know how, you know, and, but during this period, I've also, like, it has been incredible in terms of my family and friends. Like my family and friends I'm the luckiest person in the world. Like they are amazing. Like over that Christmas period especially, which is when I really was like, all my shows have just been cancelled again, and I just I was so down. Like the things that they did for me was just incredible, and it had nothing to do with what they gave me or where they took me or anything. It was all about their time and energy. The fact that they were thinking about me and they just wanted to be there for me was just like so incredible for me. Like it made me feel the safest in the world, because I was like, it doesn't matter what happens, it doesn't matter if I fail, it doesn't matter if I of anything. It was just kind of like, these people will
They're
always be
always going
there
to
for
be
me no
there.
matter what.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. It's funny I say this, literally I'm looking at this right now. These are some flowers
Aww.
that
Oh.
one of my best friends just randomly dropped off yesterday. She dropped it, I guess, for International Women's Day, but it was more just to say, like, she wanted to say how much she like appreciated our friendship and knows that I've had, a hard year this year. And
Yeah.
even my dad, for example, he recently went away. He's had a very stressful year with COVID, and he took a week away just by himself, just to sort of like regroup, and came home the other night, and there was like a little card on my bed that was from him, just saying, I'm here whenever you need me, sort of thing, which was
Aw.
like, just little things like that is like, I don't know, it's really incredible. And it's hard for me to talk about it, because I feel for those people who don't have it or feel they don't have it.
Yeah.
I sort of believe that anyone who genuinely wants that can have it. It doesn't have to be family, as in blood family. A lot of my family are not related to me. I had a lot of family that have, passed away and things like that quite young. And so it means that you build a family that's not necessarily blood relation, but I think it's really important to have those genuine friends that are, or that
Yes.
genuine, I guess, family that to support you, especially. I mean, I think about it as an artist. I think it is so important. I think that holds,
So important.
like a lot of artists together, but it's not just for artists, it's for everyone, like having that support network and having those people who genuinely empower you to be better every day and to, keep pushing and keep going is super important.
It's so important, because I feel like you get lost so easily if you don't have those people like grounding you or just there for you. And just
Yeah.
kind of like what you said, where I'm just fortunate enough in the position where I know, like, if something is ever wrong or if I'm in a bad place, like I have a group of people that are going to be there. And I just feel like
Yeah.
in our scene there are some people who unfortunately don't have those groups of people, or they do and they just don't feel like they want to burden them. And it's kind of like the
Yeah.
thing where it's like the person who is saying the least might be hurting the most. So
Mm.
it's like you always just have to, make sure you're taking care of yourself first, but just be aware of those people that you like hold dear to you and make sure they're okay.
Yeah, it's really important. Like, yeah, sometimes it is the people who don't say anything, who are struggling as well. Like, I'm not saying that we should pay more attention to certain people or anything like that, but just trying to be conscientious with people. I do definitely struggle. I don't know, I guess this is a theme for me where I feel like I struggle to convey things necessarily on social media. In person is a completely different story. I love talking to people. I love connecting with people. I love playing shows. I love being in person. I struggle, I guess, to translate that over into on social media and talking and all that sort of stuff. But say, for example, I'm not very good at reaching out in terms of sending a text or maybe sending a DM to someone, like I don't really see that, because I don't scroll on social media, which means I don't see what pops up. I don't know if people are okay or not okay. I don't
Yeah.
really see that. But with my friends, for example, they know me very much so as someone who, like, no matter what, I am there, I'm listening, and I ask the questions when I know that something's up, and I
Yeah.
think I'm a pretty open, non-judgmental person in terms of, I'm like, you can tell me anything. I'm not going to be like, oh, why did you do that? That's bad. You shouldn't. I'm not here to tell you how to live your life and how's good or how's bad. I'm here to listen to you and help you through whatever situation, and my friends definitely know me for that. And I think it was quite hard when I probably needed help, because no one's used to well, it's not that no one's used to asking me those questions. I think people ask me, but my answers are always very rational, logical, like, oh yeah, it's been, when I talk about COVID, oh, it's been absolutely fucked. It's been so hard and I've been working hard, but it's all good. I'm working. It's, like
Yeah.
I just kind of took that approach, which is very like a disconnected kind of approach, because that was my coping mechanism. And when I finally got to a point where I was like, well, God, I need help. I don't know how to ask. I don't know what to do. And my friends were like, we don't know how to help you, but we're going to be here. And that was kind of the most important thing. But I think, as you said, like, people in this industry sometimes don't have that support network and they find it hard. And one huge thing as an artist, especially touring and traveling, is like, you don't necessarily see the same people every night or every day, or you don't, go home to your friends and family. You live in another country. You're not surrounded by them. You miss, like, when I was younger, when I first started DJing, I missed, birthdays, births, weddings, like parties, everything.
Yeah.
I missed so much. And it's hard because you obviously are a bit more estranged. It's easier to become estranged from people,
Yeah.
because no matter how much effort you put in, you're not necessarily there. So that's a big thing. And I think a lot of artists don't understand the value in that. And as we were talking before about this being long term, I think when I look at my approach to things, in terms of when I look at my life and the way I kind of do it, a lot of it where it's like making sure I have solid, stable relationships with my friends and family, and looking after my mental and physical health, all of that stuff is, to make sure that, like, long term, like, I can do this long term. If you don't have those things together, sure, like the first couple of years, it's going to be a crazy wild ride and it's going to be awesome. But you get 5 years down the track and your body won't allow you to play anymore, or, you resort to, alcohol, drugs, whatever, or you start, having these relationships with people that are toxic and not really, or you have no relationships with people. So when you do get in trouble, there's sort of no support. And, I think it's really important to keep those things in check, because at the end of the day, when that's all in check, you can then use all your energy to kill it when it comes to music and that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. It's like I just feel like, since we are doing our passion for a living, a lot of people kind of misconstrued themselves, like, with their career and like with their like professional project. And that's when, like, the disconnection and disassociation from like their old personal life with their friends from their hometown, or their friends from college, or even their family, like their parents, have this disconnect because they have this like new world, but they don't understand that, like, this new world, like, people don't know them personally for who they are, like potentially their friends
Mm.
at home, or their family. So having that balance, even though it may mean long term, like saying, hey, like, I can't play the show because I have to be at this wedding, or hey, I got to sacrifice this party because I really got to go play the show. Like, the balance has, like, it should be there for the long term, like, wellness of yourself. And also, I'm just a huge advocate for, like, not only making sure your mental health is okay, but I feel like I wish more people talked about like physical health and diet within our industry, because they just don't, because it's not like a common thing for people to pay really close attention to, but it matters so much. Like, the fact that you're not getting, in a regular year, you're not getting the amount of sleep that you need to for your brain to function properly, and you're eating shit food and you're doing X, Y, and Z, and it's like, the time that you have to take care of yourself when it's possible to matters so much more, because you're in so many positions sometimes where you have to eat stuff that's not the best for you, and you have to do stuff that isn't the best for your body. So when you're home, like, you have to be on your A game and taking care of yourself, like, mentally and physically, to be able to perform at like peak measures. Like, I feel like I meet people like Black Tiger Sex Machines team and like Excision's team. And, I understand they're way older and I have no problem with having a few drinks, X, Y, and Z. But it's like, they have done it, like, they've done like
Mm.
damn thing. And like, you see them, and like when they're on tour, like, they're working out and they're doing this and they're doing that. And it's like, that's what like I want to do. And I feel like you resonate with that, because that's like the way that you kind of protrude things. And I feel like long term, it's just the way to go for longevity. I feel like you can get
Yeah,
lost in the party.
I think it's interesting because, like, health is definitely something like I'm quite passionate, and
Mm-hmm.
I would say potentially like I would say more educated on, because to be honest, like going back, like my career was meant to be in health and in
Yeah.
sports. So that was kind of where I was at originally. And then music, which I'm so happy that it happened, that I managed to like get into music. But you know, that's something that's like a passion of mine. I guess I don't talk about it a lot because I'm not quite sure necessarily how to yet, or what the platform is, or where I'll get to. And you know, it more comes up when I have conversations like this with people, you know, or people will notice like when I'm out and on the road and have a chat with me, you know, they'll notice it. Or like even sometimes, like I remember it first started coming up from photos that I posted on Instagram, people would be like, is anyone going to talk about Sippy's six pack, or
I
like
remember
Sippy's
that. I
giant
remember that.
bicep, or
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you know, like those calves or whatever, you know, like I wouldn't necessarily talk about it, but like, you know, I definitely am a big advocate for looking after my health and people looking after their health. You know, I'm not here to say how you, and none of it has anything to do with how you look. And like,
Absolutely.
there is one part of it for me where, you know, if I see, there is a way that you can look at people and go, oh, I can see that you're not looking after your body. And I think, you know, on that sense, like I might look at people and be like, I want you to look after your body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I want that for you. But in saying that, like everybody is different. Everything looks different. Things work differently for different bodies as well. You know what I mean? And my whole, I guess like focus on health is always been from a practical perspective. You know what? And it makes you feel better, which means it makes you, I don't know, it means that you have more energy to put into other things like your career, or like your relationships, or you know, like that sort of thing. And I think like health wise, like I know a lot of people probably look at me on, well, I mean, I guess I kind of talk about like routines in terms of looking after yourself, but touring is really tough on your
Tough
health.
on your body.
And
Oh my God.
yeah, and I think like I really haven't gone into the full on touring, which is just like night after night for months at a time. But like, you know, even when I was on tour in the States, you know, I had come off an Australian tour. So I pretty much was touring from like October through till March. And I obviously like underestimated it in terms of like, I'm young, I'm fit, and I'm healthy. But in saying that, I've actually still had quite a few health scares, and I'm like, fuck, if this is what's happening to someone who is looking after themselves and is not, you know, is kind of keeping themselves in check, like imagine what's happening to the other people. But in saying that, I think I'm also a lot more in tune with my body. I can see when things aren't quite working well, so I kind of jump onto it quicker than usual. But the reason I actually came back to Oz for those 2 weeks, there was one part that was for, you know, to see my family, because I knew I actually had shows booked until the end of the year. So one part of it was just to kind of be back and reconnect. But the other part was also because I had to go and see a specialist. I was seeing a specialist because of some abnormal numbers with like pre-screening for cervical cancer. And, you know, I sort of like knew about it already. I'd had things that would pop up. Something that we have, which is great in Oz, is we have like yearly reminders to have cervical cancer screening. Men have ones or that we have some for bowel cancer once you get to a certain age, all these sorts of things, and you go in and you can get it done for free and all that sort of stuff. So people are a lot more up on that sort of thing to kind of prevent it going further. So I came back and she said it was abnormal, and she was like, look, come back in 6 months and we'll do another test and we'll see what happens. And that was when COVID hit. So when COVID hit, I'm now sleeping 8 hours every night. I'm, you know, eating regularly. I'm not changing time zones. I'm not in recycled air all the time, you know, all this sort of stuff. And I was like, the biggest thing was I was sleeping, you know, like I would go during a normal touring week, I would sleep 9 hours one night, then I'm sleeping 3 hours, then an hour nap, then 4 hours, then maybe half an hour nap, you know, like just whatever I could get sort of thing. And I'd have 2 or maybe 3 nights a week where I could get between 7 and 9, and then the others were just like a shit show. Anyway, I came back 6 months later and she was like, your numbers have completely regressed, you know, like
Isn't that
And
crazy?
these are doctors that, like, especially like my GP, you know, I've known this guy since I was 12. And every time I go in there, he's like, what's going on? He's like, how's your career? What's going on? Are you sleeping? You eating? You know, like, he asked me that before he even asked why you here, you know,
Yeah.
like, and there have been so many things that he's picked up on where I'm like, oh, like, I have this problem. And he's like, huh, tell me what's, you know, and he obviously does the checks, but he goes, tell me what's going on. I'm like, oh, well, COVID happened. I'm not touring anymore. And this happened. And he goes, oh, did anything happen around this time? I'm like, well, yeah, this happened. He's like, oh, and, you know, suddenly all these things that I think might be, oh, it's, you know, physically there's something wrong. I've got this thing. He has eventually found out that it stems from, say, you know, anxiety or stress from what's been going on. And I think, like, when I look at when I'm touring, you know, like, for me, I'm already like, this is super disruptive to health. But
Yeah.
like, you know, maybe I'm sort of more used to looking after myself more, but like, you know, you're not getting the sleep. It's hard to eat, and it's hard to eat regularly, and it's hard to eat what you would normally eat, you
God,
know, like,
especially in the States with everything just being so like
I
I don't
was
know how
I
I
was
would do
like,
it. Yeah.
well, it's also really different for me. Like, I even walk into like the supermarkets and I'm like, what is that? What does this mean? Why are the carrots so big? Why are they so orange? Like, why are they not all kind of like
Like
funny
natural
looking? Because
carrots.
that's what a normal
Yeah.
carrot looks like, you know? Like, why are the apples like this big? Like, they should be this big, you know? Like, that kind of shit. And then, you know, you're touring. I'm like, I don't really know about any of this, like, a lot of different bits and pieces. And then you mix that, and then you've also got like the party culture, people doing drugs, and there's alcohol, and there's this and there's that. And, you know, like, people are asking me, oh, like, how many, what do you call pingers? Like, what do you guys call pingers? Oh, fuck, I can't keep,
Oh, what's
like
fingers?
ecstasy,
Oh,
ecstasy,
like Molly. Like
Molly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
oh, like,
yeah, yeah.
do you just do Molly every night and all this sort of stuff? And I'm like,
God, they
I
think we
mean,
get
if,
so fucked up. They literally think
yeah,
we
well,
are
and
like
like, look,
rolling all night.
I mean, it's not like I definitely see plenty of touring artists who party, and
Yeah.
I would be lying if I didn't say I don't have drinks, you know, like, I definitely have nights where I have drinks. I also have nights where I have two, and I'm like, you
Done.
know, like, for the most part, I don't really go crazy, because I'm like, how am I going to get up tomorrow morning and get on another
Your
flight? And I
body's
don't want to be
always gonna
shaking
pay
the whole
for it.
flight, you know?
Hmm.
Exactly. I mean, I guess if I was like 18, I'd be or when's drinking age for you guys? 21. See, that's
21.
the
Yeah.
thing. I was getting hangovers by 21, but I mean, we start drinking at 18, so it's
Yeah.
like we have these golden years where you can just go crazy, and your
Oh
body's
my
just like, I'm
gosh.
sweet,
Yeah.
like. But yeah, so like, you know, you've got all of these factors, and it's like, I, you know, want to be working out every day. My back was completely ruined from playing shows, because if anyone's seen me play, I just go crazy, and you go from going crazy to sitting in a chair for, you know, 5 hours to play in the next place. And I was having sinus problems because I'm not sleeping, I'm changing, you know, time zones and climates all the
Hmm.
time. And there's, you know, you're in recycled air, and they're in the hotels and all this sort of stuff. So really, like, in terms of health in that sense, like, it's really tough on your body. And like, if I make it huge and, you know, can afford to take a team, like, if I did like a tour bus, I would take
Personal trainer.
my trainer,
Yep.
and he would train anyone who knows Reese, my trainer. If anyone's seen my stories, he's amazing. But I would take him, and he would train me and my whole team. We would have like proper food that was like well organized in that sense, and
Like
we would
food
have
prep, like
a
all the shit
yeah,
ready.
and hopefully a psychologist that comes along with us, because like there is, or at least a morning meditation for everyone, you know, like, that is all super important. And I think it just gets people to be able to work at their best and feel their best, and last longer, you know, like, I
Yes.
don't want to lose, you know, 15 years of my life because I'm touring, which, okay, I'm willing to do it because this is what I love. But,
Yeah.
you know, like, you kind of want to minimize that as much as possible. And I think, like, all aspects of your health is super important. You know, I
Yes.
see these DJs who are eating like shit, and they
Night
feel
after
like
night.
shit,
All they
and
eat
you
is
see them,
McDonald's. Yeah.
they eat like shit, they party nonstop, and they do drugs all the time, and they don't pay attention to their mental health. And, you know, each to their own, like, do your own thing. But I just worry, because I'm like, man, like, this is not sustainable, and you're going to crash and burn. And I worry for them, because I'm like, I want to look after these people.
It's a
This is an
ticking time
avoidable,
bomb.
Yeah.
it's like this like timer that's been wound up to as much as it can be, but it's slowly ticking because I don't care who you are. Like, you could be the best EDM dubstep producer DJ. Like, your body is the same. Like, your body is a human
Yeah,
body. And if you don't take
exactly.
care of it, like, and I've seen it happen to people in like 4 to 6 years, 2 to 4 years, where you see these effects on their
Yeah.
mind and the way they perform, as well as their physical appearance. And you're just like, you never want to impose on somebody, but you also want to be like, hey, I fucking care about you. And you're not taking care of yourself. And like, it's not going to
Yeah.
maybe, impede on you now, but like long term, when you're really so close to like accomplishing the biggest goal you wanted to accomplish, like that may not be possible because you may not be able to do it because your body might not let you.
Yeah, your body may not let you, or you get to a point where you have complete breakdowns that you can't come back from. You know what I mean? Like, you've pushed yourself to a limit where it's like you're
Yeah.
out. Like, look at the amount of DJs who, especially those ones who announce that they're retiring and then they come back, and then they announce they're retiring and they come back because they're in a cycle of, I can't sustain this. And
Yeah.
like, fuck, it's hard. Like, I try, I'm very conscientious about that stuff. And even with me, I'm like, this is fucking tough. I have an amazing support network, and I'm really conscientious with all that stuff. And I'm like, it's
Still
still
hard.
fucking hard with all of that sort of stuff. So, I think health is super important, physical and mental. And I do want it to be talked about more, for sure. I want people to take pride in looking after themselves. I've seen some people during COVID who have, and I'm like, I love seeing that.
So
Like, there is
awesome. I've
nothing
so
more,
many
because
people
I'm
have
like,
stopped drinking or done whatever, and there's nothing wrong with having a few drinks, but like I've seen so many people be like, I'm working out, I'm running every day, I'm doing this. And it's
yeah,
like, just to take that first step, that's all it takes. Like 21
yeah,
days, dude. If you can do
yeah,
something for 21 days, you can make a
yeah.
habit and stick to it. It's like,
And also getting to a point where it's like, you're not kind of using these things as a crutch. So like, say for example, like, I drink, like, I don't know, I feel like every Aussie, like, you can't find an Aussie that doesn't, which is,
yeah.
I don't know, probably not true, but like, it's more like, getting the thing with something like having a drink for me is like, I'm not a, like, I will go days without drinking. I will play shows without drinking, all this sort of
Mhm.
stuff, because it's not like, uh, I'm not at a point where I'm like, okay, every time I drink, I have 20 drinks and I can't, like, I'm holding on to this to keep myself up and all this sort of stuff. Or like, same with plenty of other drugs or plenty of other like bad habits, or like eating junk food and all this sort of stuff, and I think like seeing people just, like, take care of themselves. I'm like, I feel so happy for those people, because I'm like, you now have like a new lease on life. You're going to
Yeah.
feel so much better. And like, I always see these people who come to me, say for example, if I have like I've mentioned some sort of health issues, they're like, oh man, like, same, I have that, and we're trying to work out why we have it. And they're like, oh yeah, well, I have 3 coffees a day and an energy drink, and I also, smoke cigarettes. I smoke a lot of weed. I drink a lot of alcohol all the time. I never meditate. I don't really talk to anyone else. Like, I'm on the screen, I'm looking at my phone 12 hours a day, all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, okay, like, whilst we have the same problem, I feel like we might find a different answer for both,
Yeah.
like, I'm sort of like, you kind of have to help, I don't know, try and, I don't know, just look at it in that sense. And I know, say for example, in America, like a big, I'm not going to say it's a cultural thing, but I'm going to say sort of how it's set up is like, when it comes to health, a lot of it is, oh, you have this problem, here's the drug to fix it, and you need to fix
So
it now. This is
bad.
how you fix it now. This is how you fix it now. This is how you fix it now. Whereas I guess the culture here in Australia is, this is how you prevent it from happening. And also, this is how you fix it forever. Not, okay, we'll give you this, but then 10 years down the track, there's going to be an issue. You know what I mean? Like,
That's
we're
what
in preventative
happens when you
health.
have like a country built on capitalism and it all runs from
Yeah,
money going around in circles. Ugh.
exactly. And I think like, for us, a lot of it is like, how can we prevent? And also, okay, like, you're having this problem now, and we can give you that drug, and technically it'll make it go away. Like, if you're like, oh, I have headaches, right? Like, okay, you have headaches, we can give you painkillers. But why are you getting the headaches? Like, I had this thing where I was getting migraines, and they were happening really, really frequently. And at first they weren't, and then they kept happening more and more frequently. And anyway, I eventually went to a neurologist and she found out why and told me how to. And she's like, lifestyle wise, or like, you know, this one thing, if you change it, now it'll go away. And sure enough, I haven't had a migraine since. And that was almost 2 years ago, you know, and no drugs. Like, she didn't like prescribe me a drug, you know, she looked at what was going on. And I think like that sort of approach is the way to go about it. Now, like, we have so much stimulation. We have like, you know, like people are having coffee all the time, or energy drinks, or weed, or alcohol, and all this sort of stuff. And the thing is, you do become dependent on things, and you eat them, and then you crave them because you've been having them the whole time, and all this sort of stuff. And so your energy reshifts to that. It's like, okay, well, I can't get out of bed without a coffee. Okay, but what if you don't have coffee for 2 months? I'm pretty sure you will still get out of bed.
Yeah.
You know, what's the difference? And I noticed, like, with these people who are like, oh, I'm never going to be able to give that up because I need it to stay awake and all this sort of stuff. And you notice after a while, your body is an incredible machine.
It's
like
incredible.
Your body knows how to regulate itself, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So like, just like how, you know, when, I mean, I know a lot of people in music will disagree with me, but like when the sun goes down, you want to go to sleep and you get tired. And when the sun's up, you feel like you should be awake. You know, there's a reason. Your body does that for a reason. So I think, you know, like when you bring it, like tear everything back, your body is actually good at going, oh, okay, hang on, I got to regulate myself.
And repairing itself and adjusting, and like the things that you can put your body through, that like I look at these people who really, they, you know, whether they're touring full time or not, who just eat shit and they do this and they drugs and alcohol, and again, you know, to each their own, there's no problem with it, like, but it's like their body endures all of it and they're still able to function, which is incredible. You know,
they're still able to function. The thing that happens with those people is, it, as soon as they stop is when it becomes an issue, you know. If you keep going, same as when I was touring. While I was touring, sometimes I felt like shit, but for the most part I was like, I'm fine.
Your
and then
adrenaline.
As soon as I stopped, my body was like, fuck you, like, stop. And then the other big one that I think is a huge one is screen time and social media. And I'm saying this now whilst this is ironically being streamed and people obviously online to see it, but I think like, so I have social media limits on my phone. I think a lot of people will know that. I have news feed eradicators on my laptop. So like if I'm on, say, Facebook, there's no news feed. It's just pretty much to like post or to DM people. Social media limits.
I'm literally going to DM you about that because I need to do that.
Definitely do.
Yeah, because it's so bad. It's like the desktop, the laptop, the phone, it's all right here. And you're just like, I want to shut it off, but then it's like for your job, you just feel like you can't. And it's
just like now how I was telling you, like I'm doing this from my home studio, but like I don't have Wi-Fi. Like I don't have Wi-Fi at my music studio because, which helps obviously a lot, you know. But I think it's a big, like phones and the connectivity and things is, I think is so, I don't know. I really think it's so negative for mental health. I don't think that social media really provides anything positive for mental health. It does for information and that, but mental health, I think it is the most toxic thing towards mental health. And you know, I know that there are a lot of problems that come up from that, you know, when people are like, oh, I can't get to sleep, but you've been on your phone all night, you know, like that can mess you up. But also just like, I notice how much of a change I have in myself when I'm on it all the time. It makes me, it just like, I'm so much more anxious, so much more stress. And there's so many different elements, you know, there's one part of anxiety and doom scrolling and seeing all this stuff. There's the other side, which is comparing yourself to other people, which lots of people do that. And it is really toxic, you know, seeing all these influencers who have this, that, and the other, and they think that that's real life. And they think that, you know, you have no idea what's really going on for that person's world. Like a perfect example is when you see people who post nonstop about their relationship and how perfect it is and how great it is. And then suddenly 2 months later, they've broken up and you've heard about how abusive it was and how horrible it was, you know, like that is just a perfect example of, you know, them selling you something, but you're not really seeing
the real
truth, know, how it really is. And that's something that social media can do. And I know quite early on when I got into music, one of the things I did was, you know, there is something where like, if I'm looking at something and finding myself comparing, that's when I start to go, okay, just mute that. Don't look at that because that's not going to help you progress. You don't progress by comparing yourself to others. You progress by comparing yourself to who you were yesterday, you know, and bettering that every day, because you're not the same as this person. And if anything, it might not allow you to grow properly, because you're only ever going to be below where that person is, you know. And I think it's mentally quite detrimental to be comparing yourself to other people. But then, like, having the social media limits is amazing, because I go on, my sole purpose is to post and interact with my fan base. You know, it is work. Like, I don't go on social media for fun, really, you know, like, so I go on there, I DM, I post, I, you know, interact in that sense. And sure, you know, like, say there might be a few things that are at the top and I'll have a quick look and then get off. But I know I've got 1 hour a day to do any tweeting, any Instagram, any Facebook DMs, you know, like, all of that stuff is under TikTok, like everything. So when you limit it to that, it means you get off it a lot more, and you can be so much more productive, and just mentally, like, I feel like I'm in such a better place.
I'll have
Rather
to
than
try
being on
that.
social media all the
I've been
time.
trying to try that. I'll have to try that.
Yeah,
It's
it is really, once you have the limits, it's amazing, because it's kind of hard at the start, and then once you get in that habit, it means that when you know you've got limited time, the way you use social media is completely different.
Very
you know,
different.
you're not there scrolling, you don't get into the, you know, vortexes of, oh, I'm now 18 comments down in this thread on some random shit that I'm like, I don't even, what,
this doesn't even mean anything to me. Like,
no, this is not adding anything to my life, really. Like, you know, when I think about life, I'm like, there's only so many hours in a day. And it's like, how are you choosing to use that time? And how is that going to span across your whole life? You know what I mean? Like, and I realized that if I've now gained, you know, 3 hours a day back from my phone, I can, you know, when people say I don't have time to meditate, I'm like, you don't have 10 minutes a day to meditate. I'm like, you do have 10 minutes a day. It's just that you're choosing to use it in other areas, which is fine. You might not want to meditate, but like, when people say I don't have time, it's just, well, what have you prioritized? You know what I mean? So, you know, you can always take 10 minutes off your social media time and meditate. Or, you know, say, for example, if I used to be on my phone 4 hours a day and now it's only 1 hour a day. Well, now I have 3 hours that I have regained from my day. Like, 3 hours is a long time. I'm like, okay, I can go for a bike ride. That's 30 minutes. I can meditate for 30 minutes, you know, like, I can make breakfast. I can do grocery shopping. I can work on writing a new song, you know, like, just regaining that time in your life is super important. I think people will be a lot more productive, and I think their mental health will definitely benefit from that a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So,
I'm so glad I try and like talk about this with people sometimes, whether it's on the podcast or not. And you're the first person that, like, I feel like I'm like listening to me speak in some like way, shape, or form. It's so hard, because it's like our industry really is so much on their phones. Like, I get it. I totally get it. Like, so much of it is operating off of emails and social media. And it's like, you know, all of like the fan base wants so much content now that has nothing to do with music, and it's like our music takes forever to make, and like that is our content, but now we're like expected to match with like the TikTok videos and the reels and all this other shit, and you just find yourself engulfed with all of it. And then in like the engulfcation, like, you're looking at people's comments, you're comparing yourself to others, you're like, why are they there and I'm not here, and all of that other stuff. And 100%. It's like, it's all a mindset, you know, and it's all like what you said, it's just practicing and putting the things in place to where you're prioritizing your time. And it's like, I'm a big advocator of like agendas and schedules, and like making sure you're getting the most that you can out of your time, but also taking time to make sure like you yourself are okay, and taking that alone time. And it's like, I got a puppy that's like sleeping next to me, and she was like my saving grace, like, during this time. Literally, look how fucking cute she is. Wait, she's cute.
Oh my god, is she a beagle? What is
So
she?
she's literally, she's sleeping. She is a mini husky shepherd mix. So
oh my god,
I'll literally send you pictures. I post pictures of her all the time, but she's the cutest thing ever. And it's like, for my mental health, for like walks and getting out of the house and like all of that stuff, it's been so good just to like not feel alone. Like, there's another energy.
100%. And it also like it takes you away. And again, like, I feel like that is like a grounding thing that gives you perspective, because it's like, at the end of the day, no matter what's going on here with my career or this or online, blah, blah. Like this is still here. This is still real life. You know what I mean?
Important.
I shouldn't say real life, but like, you know, that is more about being present and shows like, you know, the important things, I guess, and kind of puts everything into perspective. The other thing I'll just like add with like how you were just talking then about the expectation from artists nowadays, like this is a big one that I feel like during COVID, I've really seen like the nasty side of things, because I think always like because I do have this kind of work ethic and I'm kind of on top of my schedule, I definitely like feel like I'm managed to pump a lot of things out and get a lot of work done. But the expectation is I have an incredible fan base. Like I love them so much, and they're all so great and so kind to each other. And I know that's kind of like who I am, but I'm just really glad that they're the sort of people that kind of resonate, because I want to know that my fan base are being like that out in the world and to each other. And, you know, I really love that they are like that. But, you know, I think something I've really struggled with, especially, you know, say looking on Twitter and all that sort of stuff, is the expectation of artists, you know, and when it comes to, I guess, like being perfect and talking about certain issues and being advocates and all that sort of stuff. And don't get me wrong, like I know that like I am like a mentor to some people. I do a lot of teaching and things like that, and I definitely advocate for certain things. But like at the end of the day, like I'm here because I'm a music producer. I'm not a social justice extraordinaire. I know nothing about social justice issues. I really don't. I know how I live my life and how I interact with people and you know, how I do that day to day. But like, I don't know how to advocate. I don't know how to push for certain things. Like, and the thing that I really like, I hate the pressure from, you know, I'm not even going to say, well, maybe fans, industry, whatever. I hate the pressure that is put on artists to advocate for things, because at the end of the day, if an artist doesn't know about a certain issue, why should they have a pressure to advocate for that? Because what's going to happen is they're going to advocate and they're going to be misinformed and they're not going to know about it, and it's just going to make the whole thing even worse. You know, worse. I think it's and it's not good for the community. It's not good for the artists themselves. Like I think I don't know. And if anything, it's well, no, I don't know if disrespectful is the right word, but it's sort of like, why are you asking someone who's not a specialist to be the loudest voice? And I know it's like, okay, well, they have a platform to reach people, and I understand that, but it's like, I don't know, like just because they have the platform to reach, like it doesn't mean that they need to use that for everything that pops up and for all of these issues. Like, you know, like I've had moments that have come up where, you know, like things have come up that I'm like, wow, I didn't know that was an issue. Like, you know, people will DM me being like, oh, like you can't say this sort of thing because that's not very appropriate, or it's not whatever it is. And I'm like, oh, okay, sorry, I'll fix that. And oh, this, you shouldn't talk like this because this word is offensive in this setting and blah blah. And you know, I feel like I'm constantly like, okay, yep, no worries, I'm fine with that. Like I have no problem if people have problems, and or you know, I'm always here to learn, and I'm definitely here to be educated. But I also don't feel like it's really fair to put pressure on artists to you know, advocate for things that, or even just to advocate. The reason they're there is because they're good at writing music, you know, not because they're good at advocating, you know. Like they don't necessarily know about these certain things, you know. And like on the one hand, yes, like I think people should talk up about things that they're passionate about, or make a comment about things that they're passionate about, but I don't think they should be condemned for not talking about certain things. You know what I mean?
And that's what's happened over this time. You know, if you don't speak out on it, then you're against it.
Exactly, which is not true at all. So, and this is what I'm saying about some things with me. Like, if you sit down and talk to me about issues, I guess my communication style is better at talking and in person. When it comes to social media, I'm so far removed from that stuff that I struggle to stay on top of that. Like, I don't know that today is National Cookie Day, you know, like I didn't know that I had to make a comment about how good cookies are and the workers in the cookie industry, you know. Like I don't know, you know, like I don't know what's going on all the time, you know, and half the time I'm in a dark room by myself, not talking to anyone, writing music, you know. And I think if someone's not posting about it, doesn't necessarily mean they don't
They
believe
don't
in it. You know,
care, or they don't, yeah.
yeah, and there are sometimes times where the person who's being the biggest advocate might not actually handle the same situation as well as the person who hasn't made a comment on it in real life. You know, like I've been to shows and I'm like, I'll have an interaction with someone and they'll be like, oh my God, thank you for being so this, that, and the other in this situation. And I'm kind of like, I don't really know what you're talking about because this is just how I am normally. And they're like, then they'll explain the whole backstory and this and culturally or, you know, like whatever it is. And I'm like, okay, but even though I am that way in day-to-day life, it doesn't mean that like I post about that all the time on social media, because that's, you know, that's just not really what I know about. That's not really what I necessarily, it's not that I don't advocate for it, as in I do probably in my day-to-day life, but just not on social media, you know what I mean? So I think the pressure on artists to be perfect and not make a wrong step, and when I say that, it's like, well, you know, like we're all human and we all, like, we're here for, because supposedly we're here because we're good at our art. And I think, you know, as an artist, you do need to be open-minded and open to be educated and grow and all that sort of stuff. There is more pressure on you when you have a big platform for that. And I'm not saying that shouldn't be there. That is a byproduct, but I think the pressure on artists to advocate for things is tough because they don't necessarily know enough. And to be honest, like I don't really want to take bandwidth from people who do know,
who
you
do
know,
know
like,
about it. Thank you.
you know, like with the Black Lives Movement, like I, in my day-to-day life, like so much of it shocks me, you know, about the way, about so many things that happen and so many injustices. And, you know, obviously, like I did talk about it, I did post about it, but I also was like, I don't want to be the one taking airtime from the real advocates who can tell us. Like, I'm like, I need also you to educate me more. Like, you can never know enough about every issue. So I'm like, I don't actually, yes, you know, I'm with you and I'm here to be educated and I'm here to, you know, learn and hand on that information, but also like, I'm not the one that is in front of this because you guys are way more well-versed in this. You guys are experiencing it, or you guys are, you know, like that sort of thing. And so I think like in that moment, it's like, I'm all for, and I know a lot of people will see me like reshare or retweet or, you know, post things up that other people have posted, because I'm like, I'm not the one who knows this information. This person does. Let's get there and let's you know, they're well researched in that, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think I don't think it's very good for artists' mental health either, you know, having that added extra pressure to be, you know, perfect and advocating for certain things that they don't necessarily know enough about. And I've seen it happen where they're trying to advocate for it and then they get in this whole Twitter blow up, even though it's like, man, I'm just trying to do the right thing
so
here,
deep,
you know?
and it's like
Oh, and it's hard. They're not specialists. They're not social media specialists. They don't have PR helping them respond to
and like most of the time they
and
mean well, you know, like they mean well, and it's like they just
100%.
They either say it in a way that people don't like, and it's like nowadays, like you just can't rationalize with people. Like if you do have something to say, you just need to say it and get off, and like whatever said is said back, because like you trying to rationalize with someone or start like a neutral kind of not necessarily like argument, but you know, seeing both sides or debate, like it's just not, it just doesn't end well right now. And hopefully we will get back to the point where it does, but right now, like I totally agree with you. And it's just like, of course, like we support all of these movements and all of X, Y, and Z, but I rather have somebody who like has their PhD and is like doing this like in real life in real time, because that's not my job. Like that's not my career. Like I'm an artist. Like when it comes to the Save Our Stages Act or advocating for musicians or advocating for X, Y, and Z, I will stand up all day and talk. But when it comes to these other things going on, it's like, hey, like this isn't my alley, but I support you. And like sometimes that's not enough for people. And then you're just like, hey, like, wouldn't you just want it from somebody who knows what they're doing and the truth instead of me just like talking out of my ass so you don't get mad at me, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
but I want to like thank you so much for coming on. I think this is literally like my longest podcast. Thank you for talking and just like downloading it. Like,
sorry if it was too long. Yeah, I can
absolutely
definitely
love
get
it.
carried away.
Sometimes I have to like kind of pull stuff out of people, and like I'm so glad you were able to just come on and talk. I feel like you just like spread so much truth on so many different like areas of, you know, personal life as well as being an artist, and I cannot wait to hopefully be on the same lineup as you, hopefully before like 2020.
I know. Hopefully we'll
It'll be so
able
much
to
fun.
hopefully we'll actually be able to meet each other in real life. And I haven't even like met you before. I've never spoken to you. So now
I know this is like the first time
I'm
I
gonna DM you now with everything.
I know. I was about to say, now you've opened up the gate for me to DM you. So hopefully you don't regret that, because that'll definitely be something that I take you on.
100%.
No, but I greatly appreciate you coming on. I'm super stoked for your VIP to drop Friday. I will definitely be reposting that. I'll drop the link in the description. And I know you have so much music on the way. So, you know, fingers crossed everything keeps going. And hopefully by like fall time, we will see you in the States. You know?
Yeah, I keep hearing new like times when the team are like, okay, you might be out by this time, and you might be out by this time, and
they
it keeps
moving it up,
jumping around.
Yeah,
it keeps jumping around, but I'm like, you know, like whenever it happens, it happens. So obviously I'll be over there as soon as feasible, and like as soon as it's safe, you know what I mean? So
absolutely.
But yeah, I'm very excited, and thank you so much for having me. It was
I greatly appreciate it. Everyone, if you do not know her, you better fucking know her now. Please check out her stuff, and thank you so much, Sippy, for coming on. I hope you have a great studio session. Okay.
Thank you so much. You absolutely.
I'm just gonna stop recording.